it going? It's Ultimus, and today we are going to be looking at the Elemental Shaman Artifact Weapon Tree. I've definitely been hopeful for Elemental Shamans, especially. I'm partial to enhancement. I've always loved the idea of Elemental, but I've always felt like it's fallen short, and it's never something I've gotten attached to. Restoration's another one that I definitely am hoping for the best for because it's one of the healing specs that's actually appealed to me and sparked my interest, and I tend to like to play with Elemental Shamans, or sorry, Restoration Shamans, I should say. As I went over in my footage or coverage of the wow, I'm tripping over my words all video, I can tell, over the Restoration Shaman tree. But Elemental has definitely been in a rough spot for quite a while now. Anybody that plays an Elemental Shaman can tell you that, like, they barely are viable at all in PvP. I don't really know where they're at in PvE. It seems like out of all the classes Blizzard just had trouble tuning, it's been Shamans, and it seems like it's been that way ever since day one. They've had some of the most unique mechanics. They've had some of the most promising concept behind them, but they've always seemed to fall in short compared to other classes. Or, on the opposite end of the spectrum, they just seem to be so overpowered it's ridiculous. I feel like Shamans have never really been in a place where they're just perfectly balanced. So, here's hoping. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Elemental Shaman Artifact Weapon Tree, the Fist of Ra-Den. First, I want to take a look at the equip effect. Basically, we're getting the same thing there. We got the Critical Strike Mastery plus Spell Power, the 3 relic slots, which is the Frost, Wind, and Water, and your equip is, when you cast Lightning Bolt, you have a chance to become supercharged with elemental energy, causing your next 3 lightning bolts to overload 2 additional times. So I would imagine this is an additional effect on top of Lightning Overload, which essentially allows your spells to double cast. And so the stacks on there is causing your next 3 lightning bolts to overload 2 additional times. So I'm imagining those would jump, almost turning it into something very similar to a chain lightning, except it would just, hit that initial target. Is it from my impressions? I could be wrong, but that's my first initial impression with it. I think that's where they're going with that. So a little bit more RNG for Elemental Shamans, which can be fun in its degree, but the same problem we could run into that we're running into with Warriors, and that too much RNG is a bad thing. So here's hoping we can steer away from that. But enough rambling and opinions. Let's jump into the flavor text of these, or I should say the tooltips of these talents. Stormkeeper is your first talent that we're going to be starting with, and it's raise the Fist of Ra-Den to the sky and absorb all nearby electric energy, causing your next 3 lightning bolts or chain lightnings to have 100% increased chance to critical strike and 200% increased damage. Oh. So this does cost 30 Maelstrom, and it is a 1.5 second cast. So I'm curious what the animations can look like this. But essentially, you raise your fist up into the air, and then you will charge it a ton, and then your next lightning bolt or chain lightnings will have a 100% critical strike chance, and they have to do 200% additional damage. So that's 4 times the damage that they would baseline. So I would imagine this would also work with any of your instant cast procs and things like that would allow you to cast it and stuff like that. So I can imagine this working very well if you could get the RNG to line up well with the proc from the weapon itself, because I believe the procs you get that will overload and jump or attack the target again are based off a percentage of whatever the initial damage was. And so if your damage is up by 200% just from this alone, obviously it's going to do more damage. So kind of cool sounding. I like this one especially because this gives you direct control over your buffs and over your increased damage, and it does have a 1-minute cooldown, which is pretty short actually if you think about it. A 1-minute cooldown is nothing in this game. So the fact that you're getting a flat damage buff to Chain Lightning or Lightning Bolt, and it's a controlled buff and not waiting on RNG, that's really cool. So that's kind of cool that Elemental Shamans are getting something that allows them a little bit more control over their damage, I think. Call the Thunder, Lightning Bolt damage increased by up to 10% with that talent there, fully decked out to the 3rd point. And we're looking at Earthen Attunement, increases the damage of Earth Shock, okay, by up to 10%. Let's go, let's keep going up here. Searing Shocks. Flame Shock lasts an additional 2 seconds. So that's kind of cool. 4 seconds up to 6 seconds. In case you're unfamiliar with the Flame Shock, is the dot that shamans get, both elemental and enhancement, and I believe actually restoration gets it as well, at least at this point in time. I can't remember if they're taking it away from restoration in Legion, but so you're going to have the duration of that dot increased by 6 seconds, so that's kind of nice. Less time having to worry about keeping that up, which will give you more opportunity, I think, to cast your other shock spells like Earth Shock, Frost Shock, rather than just having to worry about keeping Flame Shock up on the target. Stormcaller. Your fire elemental is replaced with a lightning elemental. Oh dang. Okay, so that's interesting. I'm curious to how that's going to affect gameplay, and if you can skip talents. I mean, probably, well, no, because if you want to go down here, no, so your fire elemental as an elemental shaman is going to be replaced by a lightning elemental, which I think fits the feel of elemental shamans anyways. Like, fire does seem to be a little bit more in tune with maybe enhancement, possibly. But then again, as an elemental shaman, I think you would be able to have a little bit more of a mastery over all of the elements. Like, we're talking like Avatar: The Last Airbender status here. I don't know. That's interesting. That's an interesting choice too, that they're forcing that. And so I'm curious what the difference is going to be, or why this makes such a big deal. Electrical discharge, or electric discharge, I should say. I'm sorry. Chain lightning bounces to 1 additional target. Oh dang, 2 up to 3. Oh snap. Okay, so chain lightning right now baseline jumps to what, 2, 3 targets, I think. So you're gonna get an additional 3. So that's kind of crazy. That on top of course, with the increased damage to chain lightning from this bad boy here, kind of crazy. So that's kind of cool to see a little bit more AOE damage there from elemental shamans. Chain lightning itself can be kind of gnarly. I remember back in the day, chain lightning used to destroy people. Fury of the Stormlord. When you summon your lightning elemental, an image of Raden will crash down next to you, sending blasts of lightning towards all targets affected by flame shock. Oh, so giving you... Okay, so flame shock is going to last longer, which would initially cause you to not have to worry about keeping it up, but... it looks like you're going to want to keep Flame Shock up on multiple targets now, especially if you're going to take advantage of this bad boy with your Lightning Elemental. The nice thing is, though, if I remember correctly, that shock spells don't have a cooldown, like, at all. So they're just going to cost Maelstrom, which obviously can get a little expensive if you're just spamming them. So you might, I mean, again, we'll see how many shamans are able to kind of keep Flame Shock up on as many targets as possible. That'll be curious, especially if they have anything that makes it jump. I can't remember if they do that. It might have just been enhancement. But that's just kind of cool effect. You know, when you summon your lightning elemental, so this bad boy right here that replaces your fire one, an image of Raden, which if you haven't actually looked up any of the lore behind Raden, I encourage you to. It's actually really cool. It's deeply rooted in Pandaria lore, which is actually kind of cool that they're steeping there for some shamans, because it's actually connected to the Thunder King in a lot of really cool ways, which was one of the cooler bosses and raids from Mist of Pandaria. The Thunder King was dope. So you're going to get this image of Raden, it crashes down next to you, and it sends blasts of lightning towards all targets affected by Flame Shock. And so how long that duration is going to be, I don't know. If it's going to be 1 hit, multiple hits, is it going to be RNG to where it sends off X amount of bolts, and then it decides based on, you know, rolling of dice, essentially, where those are going to go. I don't know. Or if it's going to be even attacks split up between the enemies that are affected by Flame Shock. But either way, the concept looks cool, and especially if the skill itself looks cool, like if the image of Raden is dope looking, I think that's going to be really rewarding visually to actually see that go off. And especially because you have, again, direct control over it when you drop your Lightning Elemental Totem now. So, again, more control for Elemental Shamans, I think, is going to be a good thing. And I think in the long run, little changes like that will make a big difference for Elemental Shamans. Static Overload. Every 3 casts of Chain Lightning will cause all targets hit to also be hit by an Elemental Overload of Chain Lightning. Oh, snap. So we're just stacking on the Chain Lightning here. We're just going to be like... I feel like Chain Lightning for Elemental Shamans is back to being like the bread and butter. I know it's been one of their better skills. I mean, Lava Burst for sure is definitely like their hardest hitting one initially. Like single target damage hit, all that stuff. But... with all the buffs here to Chain Lightning, that's kind of crazy. So every 3rd cast, so every 3 casts of Chain Lightning will cause all targets hit to also be hit by an Elemental Overload of Chain Lightning. So you can basically force every 4th cast, no, every 3 cast. So is it on the 3rd cast, or once you cast 3 casts, then the 4th cast is what forces it? I'm not really sure based on reading that. My initial reaction would be that every 3 casts procs the effect, and then on the 4th cast you get the effect itself. But you're basically forcing an elemental overload from Chain Lightning every 4th cast from how I'm reading that. 3rd or 4th cast. We'll just leave it up in the air on that one. That's kind of cool. So you can guarantee that 4th cast. And so almost I'm wondering if you can keep track of how many Chain Lightnings you've cast, if you can like line it up just right to where the one target you want to get the full brunt of your Chain Lightning, then you can time it. I mean, obviously you would, but I mean, might be tricky to keep time of just like which cast you're on. But I could see good Elemental Shamans pulling that off, like just kind of throwing Chain Lightnings out there randomly and then like completely switching target and forcing pressure in a PvP situation, and then just like that one target getting all of the Chain Lightning. That's kind of cool. I mean, if that's how that's going to work out, that sounds cool. Whether it's actually effective, who knows? But the principle and on paper here, as we're looking at it, sounds pretty dope. Volcanic Inferno. Lava Burst has a chance to open a volcanic fissure under your target, dealing 5 damage to all enemies within 3 yards of the volcano every 1 second for 6 seconds. Now, I can't imagine 5 damage is the actual damage, but... So, Lava Burst itself has a chance to open a volcanic fissure under your target, dealing, we'll just say, X damage to all enemies within 3 yards of the volcano every 1 second for 6 seconds. So, and what I'm curious about, too, I mean... You might end up seeing volcanoes all over the place, especially for I feel like how often elemental shamans get their lava burst to proc, and most elemental shamans don't hard cast volcanic or lava burst at all. They wait for those instant casts because I feel like they pop up so much. So you might end up seeing volcanoes all over the place, which is interesting. So we'll see, because again, 3 yards isn't that big of a deal. We'll just have to see how much damage this does. I mean, this could get kind of crazy, but it sounds cool, but it just doesn't sound like all that impressive necessarily, because I mean that's easy to get out of too. Lava Imbue. Lava Burst damage is increased by 3%. Okay, so I was wondering where that one was going to end up. Pretty much expected. Let's look at Protection of the Elements. Reduces damage taken by up to 10% when you have that one fully spec'd out there. Then we're looking at Molten Blast. Increases the critical damage of Lava Burst. Okay, so we got the flat out buff to damage of Lava Burst by 10%, and then the critical damage is increased by 10%. Nice, so definitely lots of damage coming from Lava Burst still. I would expect nothing less. Each time you cast Lava Burst, the cooldown of Summon Fire Elemental, is reduced by 1 second. I would imagine that would count for your instant procs too, because you're still casting it. So dang, so you could... I mean, what's the cooldown on Fire Elemental Totem anyways? A couple minutes, right? So, I mean, the frequency and the rate at which you're going to get Lava Burst procs is going to be kind of high still, I would imagine. So you're going to be able to force your Fire Elemental or eventually Lightning Elemental on a pretty quick cooldown. Which is good because then you get access to this more often, Fury of the Stormlord. I do like how they're keeping consistent, and I know I said this in a video, but I was curious if I would come across this more as we got more into these talent trees here for the artifact weapons. But I do like how they're keeping with a nice theme to where a lot of these talents play off each other very well. It seems like there's been a lot of thought and a lot of good synergy going into these artifact weapons. Just from my personal thoughts and kind of looking at them with a first impression here. Again, that doesn't mean each class and spec is going to be good or viable necessarily without some tweaking. But the synergy seems to be there for like a lot of these artifact trees. So that's promising. Master of the Elements. Each time an elemental overload occurs, you gain 5% haste for 3 seconds. Dang it, that doesn't even say how high that can stack. That's just a 1 talent rank there, but I mean, elemental overload procs a decent amount. I'd be curious how often this is, how high this stacks, because I mean, the more haste you get anyways, the more spells you're going to be putting off, which means the more often elemental overload is going to occur, which means, I mean, so this is literally going to stack on itself. This is one of those buffs that stacks on itself very efficiently, I think. So that's cool. Dig it. And then last but not least, Elemental Empowerment. Casting a nature spell increases the damage of your fire spells by 3% for 4 seconds. And casting a fire spell increases the damage of your nature spells by 3% for 4 seconds. Interesting. And I wonder, again, if this stacks. And then depending on how good you are at managing your shock spells, I would imagine you might be able to get the buffs up on some of these pretty high. I can see Elemental Shamans destroying with Chain Lightning now. Like, Lava Burst is strong, But I feel like the way they're going is going to be giving Elemental Shaman some good reason to reconsider which big spell they're going to throw out there. Chain Lightning sounds like it's going to be hurting a lot, just based on looking at this artifact tree alone, without looking at the PvP talents or the actual talent tree itself. It seems like Blizzard is really wanting to give you more options rather than just hitting Lava Burst when it glows or just because you can. Because right now I feel like that's basically what your entire elemental rotation boils down to, is cast things until you get the Lava Burst proc, then spam Lava Burst. And it's not really rewarding because it's always an instant cast. You're never having to do the full duration cast, which I wish they would get rid of the instant cast on Lava Burst. I do agree with that, and I can credit that viewpoint to Sidu when he was talking about Elemental Shamans a little bit ago. I just feel like it does remove some of the reward and excitement from it because you're seeing lava bolts and lava bursts, I should say, rather than screwing up the spell name. But you're seeing them flying out almost all the time. But stuff like this is kind of cool because, again, if you can get the algorithm down, it almost seems the timing of it down, you might be able to almost, I mean, depending on how high the buff stack, if they're stackable at all. I can't imagine they wouldn't be stackable because 3% buff is nothing, so they would have to be stackable. But I could see good Elemental Shamans getting their damage really high up there and then just proccing what they need and taking advantage of that and then just unloading on somebody. So that alone sounds really cool, personally. Almost just like you are just biding your time, and then when everything lines up just right, and again, looking like you have more control over your burst, just making someone pay for it. I don't know if it's enough to make me switch from enhancement, because enhancement is just a ton of fun, and I have had this love for enhancement in my heart ever since vanilla. I watched a PvP video of some enhancement shaman running around with his one-hander and shield. It was like in the level 30s bracket for PvP, and he was just owning face as an enhancement shaman, and it made me so happy. And ever since then, I've just loved them. But this alone right here, I mean, makes Elemental sound desirable. Just looking at the artifact weapon. Whether or not they're good and viable, time will yet to tell, but I'm hopeful and I'm excited simply for no other reason other than it seems, and I say it seems, and use that term loosely, and I pray you understand that it doesn't mean that I'm guaranteeing it. It just, looking at the artifact tree here, it seems as though Elemental Shamans are going to be getting a little bit more control over where their damage goes and their burst, which in the end I think is only going to benefit their gameplay, and it's going to make it more rewarding for the players. I did miss one talent though, I just realized that, so let's bump up here and check this one out. Shamanistic Healing. When you fall below 25% health, Healing Surge is automatically cast on you. Oh dang, this effect can only occur every 15 seconds. Oh, so that stacks up to 35%. That's crazy. That's cool. So when you fall below 35% health and you have a fully decked out, Healing Surge is automatically cast on you. So you dip below 35% health, it automatically procs a Healing Surge on you. I wonder if that can crit, because that's kind of cool. That's a nice, I mean, depending on how much Healing Surge does, we'll have to wait and see. But I mean, that's kind of nice, like a little save for Elemental Shamans, because right now Elemental Shamans hardly have any like good defensives. Like, I've played against tough Elemental Shamans and I've been beaten by them before, don't get me wrong. But that's because they're good and they know their class, not because their skills are good or they're overpowered. So I think things like that would be very helpful for Elemental Shamans. So cool. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. That's going to do it for this video. As always, please do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Don't forget to follow me on all the different social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram. We have our Facebook page now, or you can get in touch with me, comment on videos, make suggestions, make requests, and you can do that across all platforms as well. But I do appreciate you guys watching. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.